Expert criminologist turned convicted child sex offender Paul Wilson is tonight behind bars after being jailed for 18 months. His victim was in court as the former Bond University dean was ordered to serve at least 6 months of his sentence. Lauren Day has the story.
A retired criminologist, now the criminal.
Are you worried about going to jail?
Paul Wilson walked freely into court, but he wouldn't leave that way. Sentenced to at least 6 months in jail.
Do you feel like a bit of a fraud being a criminologist?
A jury found he used sex games to indecently assault a girl under the age of 12 at his Indooroopilly home in the 1970s. His defence argued Wilson had already suffered a very public fall from grace, and in 1975, the attitudes towards this type of offence were very, very different to what it is now.
Do you feel the sentence was fair today?
That's probably the second most stupid question I've heard today.
The prosecution said Wilson would refer to his penis as Percy, and the assaults only stopped when she and her family moved. Throughout the trial, Wilson's wife remained by his side.
How are you feeling, Mrs. Wilson?
Judge Julie Dick took into account the public disgrace that's been involved for Wilson, but said the trial itself was traumatic for the victim. It was the 4th trial she had to endure. The judge described the assaults as brazen, showing the persistent offending and corruption of the victim. We can't show you their faces, but the victim's family nodded yes when asked if they were happy with the sentencing.
Are you happy with the outcome?
An outcome that has destroyed Wilson's reputation over a crime his victim will never forget. Lauren Day, 10 Eyewitness News.
Well, let's cross now to Ebony Cavallaro at the Supreme Court. Ebony, a high-profile criminologist has been locked up.
That's right, Andrew. Paul Wilson was today sentenced on indecent treatment of a child charges. They relate to offences committed back in the 1970s against a young Brisbane woman. At the time, he was sentenced to 18 months jail to be suspended after 6 months. That means he'll be released back into the community around May next year when he is 76 years old. But Andrew, the high-profile criminal minds expert, now a convicted criminal himself.
Good evening, Karina Carvalho with ABC News. Retired criminologist Paul Wilson will spend 6 months behind bars after committing brazen sexual offences on a young girl in the 1970s. The 75-year-old has been handed a custodial sentence, despite his legal team downplaying the seriousness of his crimes in court.
A one-time criminologist, now convicted criminal. Walking into court for his sentencing today, Paul Wilson was silent.
Are you feeling nervous ahead of the sentencing, Professor Wilson?
The 75-year-old has been convicted of 4 charges of indecent treatment of a child under the age of 12 over sexual acts he committed at his Brisbane Riverside home 40 years ago. In court today, prosecutor Philip McCarthy asked for a 2-year sentence, saying Wilson's conduct was at times brazen. The conduct involved manipulative behaviour by the defendant. He described how Wilson's victim had suffered self-blame, embarrassment and disempowerment. But Wilson's defence barrister Peter Davis said his client had contributed to the community and was of good character because of the runs he has on the board. Mr Davis argued for a 12-month non-custodial sentence, saying that Wilson's offending had happened pre-Enlightenment. He told the court that in 1975, the attitude towards this type of offending was very different to what it is now. Judge Julie Dick described Wilson's conduct as painful for his victim, saying that his not guilty plea and the trial was traumatic for her. The 4 offences show a persistent offending and a corruption of the child, Judge Dick said. You are going to spend some time in custody. She sentenced him to 18 months jail, suspended after 6 months.
Is your client likely to appeal this sentence?
I've no idea. I haven't taken instructions from him.
Wilson's wife and many of the victim's family members were in court for the sentencing. Andrew Koss, ABC News, Brisbane.